Hi, this is Rev Ed with today's Back Porch Devotional from Genesis, chapter 22, verses 9 through 14. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. He said, Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing that you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, The Lord Will Provide. As it is said to this day, On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. Again, we just have to marvel at the absolute obedience of Abraham in this instance. It is staggering to think that without question, he would obey this call to offer up Isaac as a burnt sacrifice. That doesn't mean actually that he would be burned alive. The burnt sacrifice was killed first and then was burned completely on the altar. It was a total devotion to God of whatever was being sacrificed. And Abraham was evidently willing to do this with Isaac, his only son, which is just amazing. But I think what we have to consider is that even though Abraham did not understand how God would fulfill his promise, what he had here was more than faith in God's promise. What he had was faith in God himself. He had learned over time the character of this God with whom he had been dealing. The writer to the Hebrews puts it this way in the 11th chapter. He says, By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises was in the act of offering up his only son, of whom it was said, Through Isaac shall your offspring be named. He considered that God was able even to raise him from the dead, from which, figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. The author of the Hebrews tells us that somehow Abraham calculated that even if Isaac died, God would be able to bring him back to life, because he had promised to be faithful to Abraham and to Sarah, to give them a son, and that through that son and no other son, the promises of God would be fulfilled, the covenant of God would be fulfilled through that particular offspring. We just have to reflect on the relationship, don't we, between faith and obedience. And we have to be blunt about this. Faith without obedience is not really faith. It does no good to agree intellectually that certain things that Scripture teaches us, that God calls us to do, that they're good things that we ought to do, but we don't do them. It is the height of hypocrisy to say that we believe in this God who has revealed himself to us in Jesus, and that Jesus has given us a way of life to pursue as a model for others to follow, because we're supposed to model what life in the kingdom of heaven is like. But if we walk in the ways of the world, all we are doing is demonstrating that we really don't have faith in God at all, that we believe that walking in the ways of the world is actually going to be better for us. Obedience is central to faith, and if we are not seeking actively to bring every part of our lives into congruence with God's revealed will for our lives, what he has taught us in Scripture, what he reveals to us through his Spirit, what he guides us to do as we walk with him. If we're not actively pursuing that and actively trying to put down those rebellious impulses that we always have that make us want to go in the other direction, then we hardly have a faith worth talking about, do we? As James put it, faith without works is dead. More particularly, Jesus put it this way in the 15th chapter of John, in the 15th verse. He says plainly, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. It's that simple. You can test your love for Jesus by the degree to which you obey the things that Jesus has called us to do and to be. And no matter what the apparent cost to us, as it apparently was going to cost Abraham everything, we have to live like Abraham. We have to obey God and trust that he knows what he's doing better than we do, and that his purpose for our life is infinitely richer and fuller than anything we can imagine for ourselves. So we have to trust that God knows us and has our best interest at heart, and he will provide for us as he provided for Abraham. Even according to our eyes and understanding, it doesn't look like it might happen. We have to trust this God who has made these promises to us. So let's seek to be obedient this day. Let's walk in the light of the Lord. Let us obey the commandments of God given to us through Jesus, that we might know the fullness of the life that he has promised to give us as we seek to live more deeply into this walk of faith. God's blessings be upon you this day.